I'm here in the Eddington district of Cambridge for a meeting of Cambridge's Community Safety Partnership. I've come along because last year I went to a West Central Area Committee meeting and I noted that there had been a number of violent crimes in the city where people got injured, and I asked if our probation services and the Community Rehabilitation Company were operating effectively and if we were being kept safe from these violent criminals who'd been handed suspended sentences. Now that very helpfully got referred to the Community Safety Partnership, which is this meeting where the fire service, the police, the councils, the NHS bodies and all sorts get together, and it was referred to them, which I thought was really good. But when it got into their papers, they said that I had said that statistically there was a rise in the use of suspended sentences, which I hadn't done, so I've come here just to correct the record today. Also, it'd be very interesting just to see what's happening. It's a very interesting meeting to find out what's going on in the city, and today in particular a lot of the key elements that are to be discussed at today's meeting, there haven't been papers for them, so there are no papers for some of the key elements on violent crime and on the place-based activities that the police are doing in the city. So I think it's terrible that there aren't papers for those, because everyone should be able to read them and feed into their representatives. We've got two councillors on the committee this afternoon who will be representing the public, and the rest of the people there will be officers from the various services. And so this committee is open to the public. They've got terms of reference which say they're open to the public and anyone can come and film and record, so there shouldn't be an issue. I am, as always, thought through all sorts of options of what could happen. If anyone does try to stop me recording, I'll ask why they're going against the published terms of reference, and I'll do what I can to sort of act proportionately, politely, make good journalistic judgments, and keep myself safe. So it's about time to go in. I should be arriving just before the meeting starts. They've had a bit of a pre-meeting or some kind of cafe-style thing with their South Cambridgeshire Community Safety Partnership, so I hope there is a gap where I can say that I'd actually like to make a statement to the meeting, because you have to say before the meeting starts that you want to make a contribution as a member of the public. Anyway, hopefully that will go all right, and it's about time that I went in.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the start of the Cambridge Community Safety Partnership meeting. This is a public meeting and we do have a member of the public in attendance. I'd like to start by asking Louise to highlight apologies for today's meeting.
So we've got Jessica Bowden from the Clinical Commissioning Group. She's sorry that she had a last minute to come. Maggie Page from Cambridge Huntersborough Foundation Trust. Lisa Riddle from Cambridge County Council, Matthew Quinn from British Transport Police, Adam Ratcliffe from CAMBAC, and Susie Talbot from Cambridge County Council Public Health, and David Walmsley from Anglia Ruskin University.
Thank you, Louise. We've already done welcome and housekeeping, but for the benefit of the members of the public who's here, Mr Taylor, we aren't expecting any alarms, and if the alarm should go, we should exit through these doors and out the front of the building. So we'll move on to item 7, pre-advised questions from the general public. We don't have any pre-advised questions, but we do have members of the public here who's advised me that would like to make a statement, and I've agreed to accept that. Mr Taylor, would you like to come to the table?
Thank you. I thought it was appropriate to say I want to make a statement before the start of the meeting. That's your published rules. I come because I mentioned in the minutes of the last meeting because I raised a question at the West Central Area Committee. And I just wanted to correct what's stated. I've never made a statement to the West Central Area Committee making any comment on statistics on the level of suspended sentences increasing. I went to that meeting and I noted that there had been a couple of violent crimes which resulted in injury in the city centre, and the people have been given suspended sentences in relation to them, and I asked councillors if they had confidence that the probation services, Community Rehabilitation Company, were working effectively to keep people safe. I know the papers don't say that I submitted the question to this meeting. I was very happy that it did get referred here, and that I wasn't the one who did it. So I just wanted to make those 2 points.
Thank you very much. Louise, did you get a note of that statement?
Have you written that somewhere, Mr Taylor, or not?
I haven't written it to you, no.
Okay, that's fine.
I did, I think.
If you would like for us to include that statement in our minutes of the meeting. We could do that for you if you'd like to email it to us.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if we could move on to please item 8. This is the minutes of the meeting of the 17th of October. Assuming everyone's got a copy of these in front of them, I'm going to go through page by page, and as we do so, I would like to ask if you have any comments or corrections. Let's see who gets a copy of this first.
Randomly press buttons.
Did you
There
want
we
to
go.
speak?
There we go. It's coming. It's just gone green.
Okay, so page 1. Any comments or corrections? Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. And page 8. As there are no comments or corrections, I am taking that these are a correct version of the minutes of the last meeting. Thank you very much. Moving on now to item 9 and the review of the action points from the last meeting. So, action number 1, meeting has been held. Item number 2. Steve, is this something you can update us on?
Yes, Chair, absolutely. So there was a briefing last week by police focused specifically on the east of the city, in and around Romsey, which I believe Councillor Massey attended, which was providing some information, talking around some of the tactics that we're now looking at in relation to some of the drug dealing issues that we have within the city. So now that that's been solidified, we'll make that available across communities so people can actually fully understand exactly how we're dealing with the different types of matters that drug dealing and associated behaviours bring into the city.
Thank you very much. Items 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 are closed. Are there any comments people wish to make on those that aren't covered on today's agenda?
The only Chair, just about the county-wide strategic board papers, the CSP received the public version, which are available on your website, but I noticed you do have to search for them, Ray, so I don't know if it's easier if they could be in the menu for the drop-down, because you have to sort of search strategic board. They don't automatically come up in that menu. So as they are public papers, that would be easier if they could be more accessible to the public to find that easily.
We'll raise that.
Thank you. Louise, I would also like if we could put a link on the Cambridge City CSP site that would link to the link to the county
Yeah,
papers.
of course.
That would be even better.
Yeah.
Right. Moving on to item 10. So we've already had a discussion about the structure of the community safety partnership going forward. You've got my report here. The purpose of us doing this is to make sure that we are fit for the future, that we are most able to tackle issues of the greatest priority. I'm assuming that you have read the report, and I would like to obtain your approval for the new structure, and also to gain your comment on the proposed transformation topic for the foreseeable future. So I'm going to open the floor now to questions and comments about this item.
Just relating back to the conversation we had in the previous meeting around where the coordinated city council awareness rating, the question was asked previously about, is that considered business as usual? So I just asking the question, where does that actually fit? Is it in the right place where it is, or should it be moved down under the business as usual strand?
Are you talking about the reason why it's sitting under there is because it links directly to the CSP priorities, calls that priority directly.
Right.
That's why it's sitting under there, but I mean, it can be moved if it...
I think one of the questions was, if the priorities change, would that still be business as usual? Would we want it to remain the forum and that awareness raising regardless? Because if it's put into business as usual, it's not then dependent on what's agreed as priorities. It can continue and be rolling work. I think that was one of the questions.
Linda?
I think it would continue. I think it probably is business as usual.
Yeah.
The reason that it's up there was it was specific to that priority, but I don't think we would stop awareness raising or training at any stage. So it could drop down.
I'm just thinking of protecting it really, because if it's fit for the future, which is what we want this document to be, it perhaps adds some protection to that particular work stream if it was business as usual.
Yeah, we would agree with that. Yeah. It was just
I can see why it was there.
Yeah, it's just query.
Is the proposal then to lighten the shade of the getting down to the detail?
Yes.
Okay, is everyone in agreement with that approach?
Madam Chair, can I just be very specific? Do you want that box moved down under the business as usual? Can it sit where it is, but in a lighter shade of blue?
We might have to have I mean, I don't want to undermine what we're trying to say. I can see these as very, very difficult to draw. It's really just the point of to protect that very, very important piece of work, to mainstream it as business as usual. I think just make it fit for the future. That's the point I'm saying. I haven't given any thought about how.
It could be light and blue colour with just a little line linking up from the business as usual box to connect it.
Great
Show that it's
suggestion.
there. Then you don't need to move the box.
From an outside point of view, would it not just make sense moving it under business as usual? So it's clear what it is and where it sits. Index.
That would fit in there, won't it?
And I think if we could just make it really clear, particularly if it was to be published externally, that White Ribbon's about domestic abuse, that would be really helpful as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so the decision is taken to move the box under business as usual, to colour it appropriately, and to include the description of it linking to domestic abuse as a priority.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask if you've got any more queries about some of the things that were raised in the earlier discussion, and also the transformation topic.
Chair, may I raise a point? Jack presented the serious violence update to South Cambs earlier, which obviously focused quite heavily on Addenbrooke's, which of course is of significance for the city as well. It's really important to state that although the analysis that's come out around A&E data talks around those people who are most susceptible, or those people who are seeking treatment for not just knife-related injuries but blade-related injuries, are predominantly males 20 to 24 and upwards, so they are our older target group. Although we have that, we do think it's really, really important to make sure this transformation topic stays true to the themes around prevention around young people and violence and knife crime. Because obviously what we're trying to do there is try to prevent that demographic becoming the next group. So I think that would be an important thing to just note, and it doesn't change what we're trying to achieve with that transformation topic.
if I can just continue from that. We have in Bench CLC had a meeting around our priorities this morning, and one of them is around young people, including knife crime. And our conversation was very much similar, that it's the 18 to 24 age group, so it fits with our priority for the coming year. But also the need to make sure that we are linked with youth offending groups so that we are following that transition through.
Thank you. That's very, very useful to know. I'm keen to understand, Ray, what the view of the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner is on this proposal. Have you got any thoughts?
I think it's a good proposal. I think that as a subject, it's relevant, and obviously it's work to do with the CSPs. That is national. It's a national problem. So by tackling it locally as well, there may be other stuff coming down nationally, which hopefully if I get to hear about it, I'll bring it to you and feed it to you. But I think it's a good proposal, that it's something that you do look at, because it's affecting the whole community and fear. So we need to reduce that risk.
Thank you, Councillor Massey.
Just a comment that I'm really pleased to see it. I think we're leading into looking at young people with prevention. We spoke about it before, about looking at it in primary schools a lot, because my personal feeling is that by the time you've got to the year 7, year 8s, year 9s, it's far too late. They've already made their minds up. We need to be getting in and talking to the children and also parents when they're in primary school. And so I'm really pleased to see it's a good transformation.
Thank you.
I was actually going to give you an update later on. I can give it now if you want. But part of it is to do with that. And it's to do with, you've got lots of people trying to get into schools to deliver their road safety, health, etc. If those people come together, the actual thing that you're trying to do is reduce the risky behaviour of people. So if you get in at the level of school age as low as possible, and then continue following it through the school, right up until the leave school, and you can show them what risky behaviour can result in, it reduces that risk. Whatever you're teaching, whether it be road safety, overeating, etc., it reduces that risky behaviour. People start thinking about the risk. And that, as you say, works in the schools. If you start in the schools, by the time you get to an older age, you've got to tackle it in a different way. But starting in the schools is a very good way to start. And that's where I think it should start.
And I like that. I mentioned it earlier, but I'll mention it again. It's important to remember that we have a high number of private schools in the city that we need to be looking at the same time.
Thank you. The Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner has commissioned work through public health to take on some of the engagement with schools. At some point it might be useful to find out a little bit more about that. Who could be asked to talk to our CSP about that work so that we've got a good idea of what's being planned?
I think the best person to go through is Dorothy. She'll have all the information about that.
The lead is Val Thomas.
Yeah.
On it.
Val.
Yeah, she's the lead on that stream. There's at the recent strategic council board, there was a definite emphasis made by both Dorothy and Mr. Ablewhite that there are too many organisations working in isolation, that they should perhaps come underneath that piece of work that Val's looking at doing. That seems to me to be quite a strong message from that board.
Chair, I've actually spoken to Val about it because I had some questions following her presentation, which I think can be shared. But there is a steering group for that work, and she's offered, and I've agreed that I will sit on that steering group at this point. So I thought actually I sit on so many of the CSPs, it would be really helpful to act as a conduit for information that way. I'm awaiting. I've seen an email saying please add Lee to this, but I haven't yet seen the actual date. But I will let you know, and then if you have questions, I can take them to that group rather than every CSP sending someone.
And Chair, and this is for Ray as well, having met yesterday with my equivalent in the northern area behaviour, so with responsibility for people and offending as well as my responsibilities. The transformation topic is more well advanced here than it is anywhere else. So the rest of the county will look to us in relation to this. So I think any opportunity that we can have, Ray, around people at the county level being able to either be actively involved in the group that manages the transformation topic or feeding information into that will serve the rest of the county really well.
And this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get different CSPs to take a lead, not do all the work, but a bit of a lead on things. So this is a topic that you can lead on, and it's something that if everybody takes a lead on something, it'll make it easier for you. You don't have to go and do as much on so many items. You can concentrate on whatever you're concentrating on, and you'll get the information from the other CSPs a little easier. So it gives you more chance to concentrate on the issues that you really ought to delve down into.
I'll talk about it later, Chair, when I do the priority lead update, if I may. But one of the things that I've said to the officer that we're putting up to chair this is, if that group is a replication of those of us who are around the table, we haven't got it right. It needs to be far bigger, far broader, it needs to draw lots of other people, and it's the responsibility of this group to facilitate that happening. That's the only way we're going to achieve really and truly innovative work and really positive results from them.
It is getting the right people around the table.
So, Mark, I'm going to ask you to say your next, but then I'd like us to just have a very short discussion about how we take forward the transformation work. Now, Steve's already done some thinking in Appendix B. So, Mark, at your point first, can we move on to that, please?
I guess it's slightly related to that as well, because I knew you were going to say that. For me, when we're talking about young people, it's all very well good talking about schools, but actually I think we have to talk about stuff that happens outside of school as well. And we have to talk about the community, we have to talk about youth clubs and all that old-fashioned stuff. And it might be worth then pulling in people from the counties, and people like Liz Morris in the county, but also people from voluntary organisations who are some of the only people who are left still doing youth work, given that most statutory youth work has gone now. So get them to come in and give a much clearer rationale for why it's important that I'm able to, because that's what their job is. I just like to see that. And, yes, schools are important, but actually lots of young people who are disengaging from school can still be helped, they can still be assisted onto the right track, but that might not happen through a school.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, Steve, can I ask you to kick off, really, given you've done some thinking about the transformation topic and how you'll structure the police resource leadership for that?
So we did feel it was appropriate initially with this one for it to be police-led, but obviously not necessarily always in the future. As discussed within the paper, I've been looking to Nick Skipworth, who has been a member of this group in the past, who is my detective inspector, who specialises in some of our areas of greatest risk, to actually lead the work. What's not within the appendix, Chair, that I can circulate and I'm happy to circulate is we have sat down and drafted, based around the government strategy for serious violence, a list of what we consider to be key performance questions, which obviously I've mentioned to the group before in relation to this topic. So for us, in relation to this, although there's a lot of quantitative data that of course we can lay hands on, and we've got expertise around the room and around the partnership and beyond that can help us with some of that, what we want to be able to do and make it publicly available is to have a series of activities and behaviours that are indicative of really managing the challenge and progressing it in the right direction. So a degree of qualitative information about what we're doing. So at this moment in time, it sounds a lot, but there's around about 32 key points that we think are indicative good behaviours, good activities that are positive around this. They've been built around, as I've said, the national strategy. They've also been built around some discussions with some other agencies around the country who have looked at this. And we've also spent quite a lot of time looking at the experience in Scotland, talking to colleagues in Police Scotland, who particularly in Glasgow have had now almost a 15-year plan dealing with some of these things that's recognised as very, very successful. A significant amount of investment from a number of agencies there. So we're in pretty good shape, I think, in that we've got the nucleus of the group coming together, we've got a sense of structure, and we're starting to get what I think, obviously subject to the group and subject to this meeting notwithstanding, things that really give a sense of what outcomes we're trying to achieve. So we're now in a position where we would be really keen to start to call partners together, to start to think really creatively around who attends. And actually some of the groups that have been mentioned already are really, really important. So we're talking about people like, Romsey Mill, we're talking about people like people who are responsible for public spaces where a lot of young people gather, classic examples, places like Cambridge Leisure Park. We've got a huge amount of work going on in Cambridge Leisure Park at the moment, bringing that sector to the table in terms of what they can do as the people responsible for spaces, but also people gathering, etc. So we're in a really good position at the moment from there. So I think the next steps really, in terms of timescale, are to begin to form that group in the coming weeks, to begin to set the agenda and take it from there. And I'm fairly confident with the agreement of this group that by the time we reach the next scheduled CSP meeting, we'll have some good product to be able to talk about in terms of the early stages of progressing that project.
Excellent. In my conversations with Dorothy Gregson from the Office of the Police Crime Commission, I briefed her on our thinking on this to get her feedback before we finalised these papers. She indicated her support for this, but also that the work, because of the leadership role that this CSP is taking, the potential to apply to the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner for funding for some of that leadership work and some of the pilots that we might want to undertake. So I think, before the next meeting, we will need to begin to explore what that might look at up and running as soon as possible.
And I think there was one other point as well, Chair, in relation to funding. We talked previously around the Changing Lives programme and funding for that within the city. Again, we will need to decide very carefully how we select the cohort of young people that will be involved in that work, which was shown to be very beneficial in Huntingdonshire. But again, there seems an excellent opportunity to dovetail that with this work around vulnerability. So there's already a good funded youth provision there that we can bolt into this plan.
Some of us have been involved with those discussions that initially centred around Abbey Ward and then Trumpington. I think my view would be that work can't sit in isolation from this. It's got to be part and parcel of the same approach. Yeah. We want to try and bring everybody in rather than having lots of isolated, separate projects. So that scoping of who's involved with this transformation topic group and how it's going to work might need some help actually, because potentially if we require a big group, it needs to be the right people. So that people don't feel excluded and go off and do their own thing.
I think for me, that's really important. I mean, I wouldn't want to see this initiative have too much of a statutory flavour to it and be based too much on measurable metrics. The truth be told is a lot of this is about relationships, a lot of this is about trust, a lot of this is about things that happen over a period of time. And again, I think if you talk to some of my colleagues in Glasgow, and I don't very often, but I do occasionally, if you look at some of the issues around youth provision in Glasgow, there were massive cuts to that, and you had youth centres and community centres who were continually jumping through hoops in order to continually find the funding to basically do the same thing, and then just sticking labour on it to get the next pot of funding. For me, one of the key issues here is this is going to take time. If you start talking to a 12-year-old today, it's not until they get to 22, potentially, that they make that graph that we saw in the South Council meeting better, because they haven't got involved in serious ones. And so for me, we have to bear that in mind. So part of it has to be done on a little bit more of a leap of faith, and I know a lot of statutory organisations like. But if we don't try, then it will be the same old, same old. But it can't just be about targeted work, it has to be about universal.
And again, post-meeting, I'll circulate these questions, and again, just to give Mark the reassurance, there was quite a lot around that in terms of some of those things. So again, one of the tests that came out from talking to Scotland was exactly as you said, the good plan will be looking for very clear and strong evidence around engagement in the third sector. There's a lot of stuff in here around youth provision and recognising some of those challenges and looking at how that can be addressed. So I think it's really, really important, and it does challenge, and I say this openly and I say this honestly, I've said it before, it does challenge how we have sometimes in the past been very clear around we've done something and then we've got some measurables at the end of it. It's that bit in the middle. It's not always there, it's not always convincing. That's the bit we need, and that's the bit the public should rightly expect in terms of activity.
Can I make a suggestion, which is that in terms of us all thinking about who best, following on from Mark's thoughts, who's going to need to be involved in this transformation topic in shaping what happens, certainly in the initial stages? Would it be a good idea for us all to think about who we would think needs to be nominated to go forward, and then Steve send these to you, and then you can begin to coordinate the suggestions. And we should have all members of the board.
Do you want me to collate them and send them to you?
I think that would be really helpful as well. And again, one of the things that comes up in the key performance questions, absolutely as it should, is around what commitment are we getting from the private sector? And that's something we don't often explore. We have got a number of big businesses with social responsibility budgets, etc. We need to be exploring that. So I would be really keen to push exploring some of that with some of those people. We have got some good examples of that around the city of private companies that are working with us objectively, independently, and on appropriate terms in terms of what they're doing. But that brings not just financial investment necessarily, but it brings a different perspective in terms of approach. But that would be very helpful, Chair. Yeah, thank you.
And may I add that then, any suggestions for opportunities to approach private companies, either through other relationships, for example, Cambridge Junction have good relationships with some of the high-tech side of the Cambridge economic community, but to just consider how we might broker some of those conversations.
The City Council have their own project which they're struggling with, and if I had a pound for every organisation that said to me that Cambridge companies were going to solve their problems, I wouldn't have to do any fundraising because everybody thinks that's the case. The reality of it is it's not the case. Some of those big organisations who have well-positioned CSR work have made some priorities, and some of those priorities might sit with us. But the truth be told is, if we're taking a look at this, in a broader sense, more than just Cambridge, and we're looking at across the county, when you look at the types of firms that exist in the rest of Cambridgeshire, there aren't any more Arms, there aren't any more Braston Park, there aren't any more Microsofts. What you're talking about is small local organisations. And the truth be told is, there is none of these organisations have a chief exec with bags of cash under his desk just waiting for someone to ask so that he can give it out, or she can give it out. The reality of it is, we might have to be a bit clever in that, because everyone is trying, and so far everyone is failing.
I know your questions. But we shall keep it on our agenda.
Yeah.
If there are no more comments, I'm going to draw this discussion to a close. Recommendation 3.1, that the board members approve the new approach with a review at the next development day. I'm going to add to this, if I may, and a second point which we will vote on separately, which is to agree the transformation topic as described. So could I ask those members of the board who have voting rights, please, to indicate by raising their hand if they approve the new approach as outlined in the report and the diagram as amended in today's discussion. Please raise your hands.
May I just seek a point of clarity, Chair? I think serious violence, young people, knife crime for me, I would be more than happy to support that. I just wondered if we would be willing as a group to allow the transformation topic group itself to make sure that the absolute clarity of the objective is theirs to define and then to come back with this to us. I'm not sure the wording as it's written there is exactly right. So I think strategically, absolutely right. But are we willing to allow that group to just clarify exactly what they will be working
I think
on?
that's a very good suggestion. Does anyone else agree? Is there any disagreement with that? Thank you. And then by raising your hands again, if you indicate with the point that has just been made by Steve that there's flexibility for the group to further define topic, to indicate by raising your hand if you agree with this topic. Thank you very much. So moving on please to item 11.
Yeah, sorry, just one point of clarification. So you want us to contact Louise with contact details of who might sit on the transformation
Yes,
team?
please.
Right, so it goes to Louise, not to Steve.
Yes, so I'll send out an email after this meeting, because
That's it.
obviously we've had some apologies that people won't be here.
Right.
But just to say that I'll change the structure chart so that everybody can see the changes that have been agreed, and then ask them to collate the information, and then I'll send it on to Steve as one collation, so there may be repeat suggestions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to move on now to strategic assessment priority domestic abuse and the Q2, Q3 report to be noted, which Lee and Lisa, who's not here today, are presenting to us. I just want to make you particularly aware that there are recommendations on page 3 and page 5. Be mindful of those. Being in a position to indicate your support for those at the end of the item.
Thank you. When I sat down with Lisa and Linda to establish what we needed from this particular report, we felt it was an opportunity to really take stock of where we were with this priority. This has been an important area and agenda for this partnership for a number of years, and we have talked frequently about the numbers and maybe some case examples. We've had discussions a lot. So this report isn't data heavy, and it's not trying to just push that further and further and further delving into the data. There are quite a lot of agenda items within domestic abuse. It's quite broad. We're looking at different modalities of abuse and different victim demographies and things. And we've established quite a lot of information already. So this really was an opportunity to look at where recommendations have been in the past, what the partnership has achieved, whether there are any gaps that we need to discuss, and what that might look like taking it forward. So this is a little bit of probably a different feel on this one, and Lisa does send her apologies, but she and I have discussed this in quite a lot of detail. Last time we did a lot of talking around young people and direct abuse of younger people. This one is going to take much more sort of a strategic view. And I will very quickly touch on some of the data, because I'd like to, and you would miss it if I didn't. But it's not going to be the main focus. I'm going to talk mostly about the recommendations and open it to discussion around how that might move forward for this partnership towards the end of this year and into the next financial year. So when we talk about local police data, and we talk about two different types of the main types of incidents and crimes, we see that overall there is a kind of fairly level number of incidents. The population changes slightly. Cambridge is not quite so much as some of the other areas at the moment with massive housing, but we've got the rates in there as well to kind of give you that. If you can, so between 16, 17 and 17, 18, the rate is fairly flat. That is the same as the national trend. Still looking at about 20% of people that say they have been victims. And certainly when you look at the crime survey for England and Wales, there isn't massive increases. They think it's quite a static trend at the moment. Where it looks like big increases in crime, this is for multiple reasons, one of which is that the definitions change and different things become crimes, so there will have been increases. A couple of years ago, an HMIC visit prompted some improvement in recording, and you will see that change there as well. And over a number of years, we have seen increased reporting to the police. There are a number of reasons why the crimes look different in terms of what would appear to be a trend compared to the incidents. But that is, we have discussed before the reasons why the crimes change. So things like the harassment, the coercive control behaviour, these things have been new and introduced. As I say, when you look at the national dark blue line in the middle, that's all people, and it's separated by gender as well, because we know the gendered nature of this. You can see those last few years where that really doesn't seem to be changing an awful lot. They do, this is March 2018, there's always a slight lag when looking at the national stuff because they do quite a lot of auditing before they release it. And this was looking at the sorts of crimes that are recorded by the police with the domestic abuse marker. And we substantially still see that violence is one of those. That is partly, I think, because it's what people mostly associate with domestic abuse, even though there are the other modalities around financial abuse, coercive control, sexual abuse and things like that. But I think it also highlights to us, and this partnership's talked before, about the severity of some of the violence and the risk of homicide and things, where actually that is still a substantial risk in some cases of domestic abuse. But that's just to sort of outline where we are still in terms of the police recording. Please do, if you've got questions about the data, I can always take those back if it's something you haven't got readily to hand. When we look through the recommendations, a step back, this partnership has already achieved an awful lot in terms of the activities it had planned. So the Tough Love into schools, the awareness raising, the annual conference that Louise worked so very hard to do, that have reached a wider audience, those opportunities for sort of really exploring some of those issues within that conference and having things like the victim's voice or the survivor's voice, those are, not to be sniffed at. These are hard things to organise. They are sensitive issues and people, have to build up a lot of courage to come forward and do some of these things. So this partnership's already been, right out front doing this work. I looked back at some of the national recommendations and there were one or two areas that I feel that we could discuss in a bit more detail. Awareness raising continues to be one of the top recommendations nationally. When people go out, like I was saying before about the violence being more readily recorded, that's partly because there is still the misconception that is the entirety of domestic abuse. People don't readily recognise the financial abuse. People don't always recognise child-to-parent violence as being within the domestic abuse definition and a recordable crime. So there are still areas that continued discussion will bring that awareness raising to light. And the national report, the Home Office Select Committee report, talked about a different set of ways of doing that, and they talked about being mindful of your local need and improving that. I went back to Vicky from the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Partnership and asked what was going on and discussed their action plan with them. They have got the counter-wide materials that are already readily available on their website. They would be very happy for the partnership to continue using them and in fact encourage it because of the consistency of the message therefore. So a real kind of breaking of the geographic barriers and boundaries, that actually the same message is heard in South Canada that it is in Cambridge City, that people as they move across boundaries still hear the same things. It also stops having to duplicate or newly create resources where there are some already available. And they are always considering the next thing that might need to be made, and whether that's a new language or looking at a minority group, and that conversation can still continue. And if this partnership feels that there is still gaps they want to discuss, that is, you know, readily available to you here. The other one that the Home Office Select Committee picked up on was LGBT plus awareness raising, that there is a consideration of it not being fully understood. There still being quite a lot of myths about whether domestic abuse happens in same-sex relationships or with people who have transitioned. So that is one area that I think, you know, we haven't done before, particularly. It's a very sensitive issue, and for South Camp we recently ran an LGBT plus hate crime survey, and one of the things that was quite apparent whilst we were running this was the level of fear people still have about being out in the community, in the wider community. And so actually awareness raising might need to be done in a slightly different way, because they may not be accessing the same information in the same way. So I think it is something that would be worth a discussion here, and this board taking a view on whether it thinks that actually that could be something it wants to do. Go on, you want to say something? The second set of recommendations around engaging with organisations, particularly those that are already around the board. So areas that this partnership's already started working on are domestic abuse champions, but actually there is always a requirement, partly because of turnover of staff and you know, organisations expanding and things, for support to the county to encourage each organisation to have a domestic abuse champion that can attend the county-wide meetings, that can take back best practice to their own organisations, that can raise awareness for their own employees. One of them specifically is around having a domestic abuse employee policy. Everyone is all, you know, encouraged to have that. At the time of writing, I didn't have time to find out consult with every agency, but that is something that this partnership could do, would be to find out which organisations already have an employee policy, share best practice. There are example policies around, encourage that to go out into partner agencies, looking at how they would support employees who are victims and survivors. And that would really, when you think about the number of people that you can reach just through the organisations that sit on this board alone, that's, you know, that spreads that message and that protection in place. I'm going to throw it open to discussion or questions.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Lee. Some interesting points there, and some important challenges to us as well to think about. So, questions, please, observations.
Yeah, I think what you said about domestic abuse is a very hidden issue, and it's something that people find hard to talk about, and we have to look at ways of reaching those people who are frightened to come forward. And so, yeah, this is something that needs to be done, but it's happening all over the place, and it's not down to age or sex or your job or anything else. It happens throughout society, and it needs to be tackled. And people need to know that if they do report it, they will be protected, they will be listened to, and they will be believed.
Thank you. Councillor Massey.
I just want to highlight that Woodworth House, it's the hostel for vulnerable young women, is at risk of closing, so they've lost their funding, and that could potentially have an impact for younger women who are reporting domestic violence in their relationships if there's a lack of facility for them to go to in the city. This is not a high-risk hostel, I believe. It is one of the medium-risk hostels, and I think it's something that we do need to be aware of.
This has had quite a lot of media coverage this week. I would just like to ask members of the CSP if they are aware of this matter, and if they are engaged in any dialogue with the the County Council, who I believe is the funder that's looking to withdraw funding.
I'm currently engaging with the Wood House themselves so I can fully understand their situation. So because I want to know what fallback option they've got should their funding be complete. So the answer to County Council, not yet.
And would you be able to report back to this committee once you've made those inquiries?
Yeah.
It would be useful for us to know if there is a likely impact upon vulnerable women in the city. We as a CSP may wish to have a view on that and have a discussion with the County Council.
I agree.
I'd like to ask a question, Lee. This is in relation to the detail of the data on the second sheet. Q3 diversity data in the IFA service.
Oh, yes.
Related to disability.
I might have to take the question back because I don't produce that data, but yes, I will find out.
I'm just wondering if there is a wider sense of data relating to domestic abuse and disability that would be useful for the CSP to be aware of.
I can take that back and have a look into data and see what we've got. It has. We often find that one lot of data is collected and another, but not together, so that the overlap is difficult to establish sometimes. The national research has indicated that people with disabilities and lifetime limiting illnesses are often at greater risk because their carers are also their partners, and therefore as health deteriorates and stress increases, there is that risk. There is also the risk of the financial abuse where one person ends up being the carer and sole arbiter of the money, even though it may not be there. So there has been this question before, and the national evidence does seem to indicate this increase in risk, and a reluctance sometimes for the victim to come forward because that is also their carer as well as their partner or their child. It could be a child with supporting a parent, for example. I haven't got the local data to hand, but I certainly can go and investigate it.
Thank you. Councillor Massey.
Just on another point, where you mentioned about the domestic violence also being a class that it's a child against a parent.
Yes.
And I think there is a huge issue that I don't think parents know that, there'll be some of the serious abuse that they can get from their children who sometimes are young adults is classed as domestic violence and could be reported as such.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's something that we could be highlighting a bit more.
I think it could, and there has been some campaigns. It did hit the national media a couple of years ago. We did some additional research on the back of it. It's quite a high proportion of the domestic homicides actually are child-to-parent violence as well. And I know a lot of the fear from parents and often mothers who maybe suffer the brunt of the physical abuse is the fact that they are then legally still responsible to take that child home with them. So there's that sort of conflict of at what point is my safety at risk enough in order to have the police be involved or social care involved. There also seems to have been a certain, quite a large proportion where children with additional needs are the perpetrators against parents. And that's a quite complicated, complex area to kind of really work out how best to intervene, particularly while they're minors. But yeah, I agree. Raising awareness about who to go to for support if that's your family and that's the situation you're finding yourself in would be really valuable.
But equally, it's when we're talking about the education and we're looking at prevention, it's about when we're talking to the children about best relationships, we're talking about relationships across the family as well. So I think that's important that we try to make sure that's all incorporated into the education aspect.
I think you're right, and I certainly, from my understanding, the work that they've been doing in schools over the last few years is about respect and healthy relationships more across the board, and understanding how to interact and the acceptable behaviour is different now in school than it was, 15, 20 years ago and things like that. So there is some move towards that. I think we need to be mindful of what can be delivered in school, but also what should be modelled in school by the grown-ups that they are surrounded by. That's an important. It's one thing to tell them one thing, but you've got to show them as well. So there's you can get very mixed messages as a child, and I think you need to be aware that actually there's something wider needed as well as what goes on in schools.
Lee, we talked earlier about how Val Thomas was coordinating a public health programme of engagement education initiatives in the county and Peterborough schools. Conscious in the past the CSP that we bid for money from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner to run very effectively performances of Chelsea's Choice and other healthy relationship workshops in the city's schools. I would ask, I think we should be asking Val for an idea of the programme of such activity in the city's schools so that we have reassurance as a CSP that the good work that's been undertaken is going to continue. So
I'll take that
you take that back?
I'll take that back. So at the moment there isn't a programme yet. They're still at the exploratory phase. They're trying to work out what would be offered universally to schools, what would be offered in high need areas. I think there's that question again about how we have targeted work alongside universal work, and I'm not sure, given that the size of the pot of money they've got, how much that's going to cover, and whether, once we know what they're delivering, whether there might be a discussion around this partnership around whether that feels like it's enough, or whether there's additional need.
And any point whether that's going to all schools.
Yeah, well, from the discussion that I think that initially they're talking about having all schools having access to resources online, some schools having medium level interventions and others having really targeted work. That runs the risk of some schools maybe having a gap, but I have asked her how those profiles are being put together in order to establish that level of need, and like I say, I will sit on the steering group to try and work with that, and then I will feedback as soon as I know.
Thank you. Has anyone got any more points? Linda?
I'm just wondering how we capture the recommendations. In the past, we had a plan which gave the overview, the strategic overview of what we were going to do coming out of our strategic assessments, and then we had working groups under that each of the plan. And the White Ribbon campaign would have captured an awful lot of the awareness raising. I just feel now, although we're moving forward very positively with the new structure, we've sort of left a few things undiscussed, as in at this time of the year we would normally be doing that, looking at a new plan, looking at task groups and looking at action plans that would fall out from those task groups and deliver, and then that would be fed back up. We've sort of got a little bit of a gap now where does this go? Are we saying, that's really nice, well, whoever's here today, take away, talk about your policies or not? I don't think that would be really good enough. We have to say, this is what we're doing to achieve these recommendations, and how do we do it, and how do we come back with them? So there is a bit of a gap there.
Do we have thoughts on that people wish to share now?
One option would be a very time-limited task and finish group to look at these recommendations and timescale for them, coordinate that, and bring it back to the next meeting, possibly with some of the tasks already complete.
I guess we should talk to the lead, Lisa Rebel, and ask for her opinion on how we should go forward with it. But I don't think we should just leave it that we've talked about it, we've said there are recommendations, and we don't know where the next step is.
2 points. First of all, I think that talking to Lisa, if you and me could talk to Lisa and do exactly what you just suggested, which would script how we could deal with these recommendations, but I don't think we should leave reporting back to the next meeting. We meet too infrequently for that to be the next touch base. I think what we'll need to perhaps do as the CSP is have conversations with each other via email to accept the fact that this bit of work's happening, we're all happy, we've had a chance to comment and get on with it. That's in everyone's
Is that
agreement.
part of the role of the delivery group? Could we take that to the, I mean, if we can all, we haven't got a date, have we?
No, I was just reflecting on that. I think
We need to have that meet regularly and go to there.
No, I think that would certainly need to be the intention. I think I would like to see in the next 4 weeks at least a first meeting of that. And that seems like a good agenda item for that meeting to look at.
That's a much better solution, Lee. So, in terms of that delivery group, do we have a clear idea of...
Sorry, Chair, are we talking about the multi-agency steering group?
Yes.
It's a resident county delivery group, otherwise it's getting confusing.
Yeah, sorry,
So we need to be really clear. So we're talking about multi-agency steering group.
We are, thank you.
Yeah, that's fine now.
Are we clear who sits on that group? Is there anything that needs to be discussed? Is that fairly obvious?
I don't think we've fully defined that yet, but I think that's something we could probably do outside of the meeting, just through some exchanges. Just recognise where we have had the gaps in the past. And I think, again, looking at that being police-led, I think at the moment, when you start to think about things like the agenda, the item just discussed there, plus things like just a kind of a check-in with where we are around the business-as-usual groups, just to highlight key issues there, that starts to form quite a helpful agenda for that first meeting. And as we said before, the transformation topic, because of the size and the approach we want to take there, that's something that would be separate outside of the multi-agency steering group. It couldn't be subsumed into the multi-agency steering group. They have to be different.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think that's a good solution.
That sounds a really good solution. So, can I ask the steering group that we're working on this, Linda, Steve, Lee, with input from Louise, no one else wants to be involved, convene that next meeting, draft an agenda, draft the terms of reference for that group so we're all clear about what it is, what it's going to do, who's involved. Let me see a copy of that too, and we can move forward with that. Is everyone happy with that?
Yeah.
And that covers off the point about how we take forward the recommendation. So with that in mind, can anyone who's entitled to vote indicate that they support the recommendations as outlined in the report, please, by raising your hand?
Lisa did as well, but I don't know if she put that in the email.
Yes, she did, yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to have a short 1 minute break to get myself a glass of water, so please do take a couple of breaks if you wish. We are back. Thank you, colleagues. We are now on agenda item 12, verbal updates from priority leads. Steve, this is both of you. So, over to you.
I think I'll keep it fairly if I may, around 2 priorities. And again, post-meeting circulates additional data in support of what's to be discussed. But safeguarding people against violence and exploitation, so clearly aspects of that will be developed through the transformation topic. So what we'll continue to focus on in relation to this one, as discussed in previous groups, is we're particularly looking at behaviours towards people, particularly about vulnerable people within locations, in relation to some of the work around county lines, which continues to be an issue that we're focusing on there. There's more and more activities being delivered at the moment looking at different forms of exploitation within the city. So there's a lot of work going on, as you're aware, in relation to some quite innovative work around exploitation within adult sex working communities, which is something that we are looking at there. So what we need to do in the next quarter, if you like, really is demarcate between those bits that will go into the transformation topic and those bits that will remain in there. But we reported yesterday at a meeting on the activity of the main, one of my teams that's focusing on that priority around exploitation. So since May, I think we're now at 138 arrests of people who have been arrested for offences that are linked to exploitation and violence towards vulnerable people, which is obviously a positive place to be. And a number of other metrics have been gathered from there, which I'll circulate. The second priority around vulnerable locations, so you will recall from previous meetings there are a few facets to this one. We also discussed this with South Cambs earlier on today in the separate meeting around that. So the vulnerable locations work at the moment, the main thrusts continue to be around properly establishing and progressing the city centre group. That's still not quite where it needs to be, and as in the paper within Appendix B, we're looking at a slight change of leadership there, just to free the previous chair up to be a little more operational and to have a little bit more uniform control, if you pardon the pun, of the leadership of that group. So there's the city centre group we need to focus on. There's obviously the strands around continuing to respond to geographic hotspots as they emerge, predominantly led by Linda's team, but obviously working very closely with Linda's team. And going back to the previous action that I talked about right at the beginning of the meeting today, the main thing that's appeared for us through discussion with communities in the last quarter or so has been issues around what we would consider to be mid-level impact drug supply issues. So just to clarify around that, we had a meeting within Cambridge. A couple of people around the table were there, which was led by the Chief Constable, and we talked to a lot of communities that were present there around their particular concerns around hotspots and vulnerable locations. What we had recognised is whilst there is always a degree of background noise, if you like, not wishing to be flippant, but there's always a degree of background noise in every community around drugs. We know that, we accept that. Where we need to focus is those areas where the cumulative impact of problems starts to build up in terms of frequency or the interference in people's lives on a day-to-day business becomes disproportionate. Those are the areas we really need to grip. So 2 examples of those within the city. The area of Brunswick, we recognised as a police service at that meeting that we hadn't responded to that in the way that perhaps we should, and there was some learning that's come from that and some apologies made to communities there around some opportunities missed. But also, we're now using that to focus our work around some of this hotspotting. So at the moment, there's a lot of focus around Romsey in particular, meeting last week. So the emerging issue at the moment for us is lots of good tactics, whether they're from the city or other partners or ourselves, but the need to work a little bit harder around some of these cumulative impact problems that we have around drugs. So that's where the focus will be going forward. And we'll be able to report at the next meeting around what we've done in Romsey, what we've learned in relation to the Brunswick experience, but also being able to adapt that to other areas. So that's what we'll focus on going forward, alongside obviously the heavy involvement in the transformation.
Thank you very much. Just for reference, Steve was referring to Appendix B,
Yes.
which is of the earlier report into structures to outline policing response to these issues. So, opening the table floor to questions on these 2 priorities.
Just had a question for Steve regarding vulnerable locations. I just wondered if there are any issues in around North Arbury or King's Hedges. And the reason I mention that specifically is the work where South Cambs are doing around Orchard Park, and bearing in mind, they're just divided by a road, one South Cambs and the rest is city. If we're looking at working jointly on some of these priorities, that might be an area where we could join forces with South Cambs, because the issues could pretty much going to be the same. We're just divided South Cambs and city by a single roadway.
Yeah. And I think that's something we have looked at, and the beauty of, as I say, since we had our restructure earlier in the year, is obviously the command and control of the 2 resources, 2 sets of resources sit with myself and Paul Rogerson, so Paul will automatically think of those things together.
Yeah.
So if there are environmental issues that cross boundaries, then we will just manage those as far as necessary. In fact, we have got some examples of some problems that we're managing across multiple boundaries, but we've got the benefit of a single point of leadership, which is good.
Yeah.
That is good, because obviously there are other areas of the city that we've been thinking about recently, such as Trumpington. So I suppose the question is, are people from the local authorities routinely involved in those discussions, both from the city and from South Cambs? And and councillors as well as officers,
Yes, absolutely. I think
and county councillors where that's relevant
yes,
too.
and there are particularly some meeting points, inevitably, because of the geography, because of the donuts around the city. There's lots of meeting points between South County and the city, of which that's one, Chongqing's another. Aspects of Cherry Hinton, Fen Road, all those kind of areas where we need to do that. And again, it's important to make sure that elected members from both authorities have the opportunity to participate as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions or points about Steve's report today?
No, I think maybe just want to comment just to thank Steve and Paul for inviting me to the briefing. It was asked to be on the locations, which was very, very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, and it's really good to hear that arising from that public meeting, which I came to a couple of weeks ago, that the police have taken such a responsive approach. I'm sure members of the public will feel greatly reassured by that. Thank you. So then, if everyone's happy, I shall move on to item 13, the domestic homicide review update from Linda.
We recently submitted a domestic homicide review to the Home Office. An update on that action plan is that the actions are either completed or in the pipeline, and the ones that were in red are in red because we can't do anything with them until the Home Office has come back and approved the plan for publication. They have come back now and said that they would be looking at the review on the 29th of March, and following that will let us know if we have any more work to do on it or if they're approving it, and then we go ahead and publish if there are some issues around whether we do or we don't, but it would be at that stage we would get permission to publish and can complete the action plan as well. So that's the update on that. I will come back with whatever the Home Office says when they have responded to us. There are sadly 2 more domestic homicide reviews in the pipeline. I have given you very short summary and an online summary of the 2, and they are both suicides but with domestic abuse in the people's lives, and there's a statutory duty on us to carry out domestic homicides in those particular circumstances as well. The issue I'm putting before you today is how to fund those reviews. You may or may not remember that the last review cost £10,000. These are likely to cost somewhere around the same, possibly less if we get the same author and chair of a panel for both of them. I have gone out to look for expressions of interest, so it gave me some indication of the kind of funding that we're looking for. The other issue is that we don't have any funding within the Community Safety Partnership. Last time the Police and Crime Commissioner, as part of our community safety funding, allowed us to use £10,000 to fund that review. That won't be happening this time. So I have come, you have a statutory duty to perform the reviews, and I've come looking for funding for them, and it will be in the region of 12 to 20,000. We will have to, it will be over 10,000, judging by the expressions of interest, so it will go out to procurement process, but I need to know where the funding is coming from first. So the recommendation is that the statutory bodies or other bodies agree to fund the costs of the DV tours and to commit around £4,000 each to ensure that they're carried out to high quality.
Thank you, Linda. So the Home Office is looking at first review to sign it off on the 29th of March.
They didn't say when, that's when the panel is, they didn't say exactly when they would come back after that, but that's
Okay, so that's a good piece of work that's been done and actions have been progressed. The issue about funding of the domestic homicide reviews, given the situation, I don't really think we have much choice other than as statutory agencies to accept our responsibility. No one's got this amount of money sitting in their budgets doing nothing, so I appreciate it's going to be difficult for everybody to have to make the case for this. Before I take a vote on whether or not we agree this is the right approach, can I ask Ray if there's anything that you think there's any possibility that the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner could help with, given the, these are sorts of things that are very expensive, we have no leeway and no money to fund them.
I think what you'll have to do is you will have to apply to the Office for funding. I can't actually say definitely there would be funding or definitely not. It's something that you would have to apply for because it's not within my remit to be able to give you that answer. I'm afraid.
Thank you.
It's worth, if you want to do a report to the office and ask for that. But there are actually some, I was over at March, and what they're doing is the councils are actually putting in a contingency fund. Different people, different partners are actually putting in contingency fund because they're benefiting from it, so it's not just the council, other partners. So that might be something that you could look at.
Thank you. Linda, you wanted to...
just that we had already asked the Police and Crime Commissioner for the money, and we're told that it wouldn't be possible this time round, that the money was earmarked elsewhere. It was done through email. I don't know whether it would make any difference if there was a formal request from the partnership. We were told categorically there wouldn't be money for that.
I just think it needs to be minuted that the Police and Crime Commissioner needs to sort this out. It's obviously going to be an ongoing issue for CSPs, not just this one. Unfortunately, having gone for a long period without doing any, we now see number 2 here, number 2 in South Kent. And that at some stage here, Police and Crime Commissioner's got to put his finger out and say what is actually going to happen here. Because arguably, statutory organisations passing around the begging bowl every time this happens, A, is not very efficient, B, the more it happens, the less full that begging bowl is likely to get. So, yeah, from my point of view, and as a not a statutory board member or a board member, CBS hasn't got £4,000. I think the other things.
Back to the office.
I was going to say to add to that, Jason, one of his priorities is domestic violence, and this is linked to domestic violence. This is, the cause of it was domestic violence that we're looking at, and that's something that I think he does need to look at. The sad fact is we are seeing more and more. We shouldn't be, but we are, and it does really get into his remit as well. In my view.
Can I just be clear with everybody? We have discussed it at the Domestic Abuse Delivery Board. We have discussed it at the Operational Board. We have discussed it at the Community Safety Officers Domestic Homicide Review. I haven't come here looking for money without trying all the options that might be out there. The problem for everybody is across the county, everyone's in the same position in terms of not being able to bid into central funding for something that might happen or might not happen, and then the domestic homicides come up unexpectedly and it's midway through where your budget cycles are. So we have had quite a lot of discussion around it so far. I'm not saying that still the right person might ask in the right place and get a yes, but certainly has been a lot put into trying to get it ready for them.
And there's no question of cost being a factor in terms of determining whether to do DHRs. Let's be clear, we are taking the decision whether to do a DHR entirely on the merits of whether it complies with the requirements. I'm minded to, following our discussion today, make the case of the drain on the collective public purse directly to the Police and Crime Commissioner and ask for a collective approach to be reconsidered across the county. It may not be that there isn't any hope, and I do accept that you've exhausted all of the options, but hearing the views today, I think should like to express our concern about the drain of doing domestic homicide reviews on the statutory partners and ask if there is a better way to address this important responsibility. I don't hold out much hope, and should I get a negative response, then I will be writing to all statutory partners to request a contribution. If you're in agreement with that approach, would you let me know that you are? Thank you. Stevie, you're...
No, I'm just thinking that obviously it must be done. I think from my perspective in terms of voting, so I'd have to abstain until I've had a chance to look across all 4 partnerships that I'm responsible for, plus obviously the 2 in the north. So it's something we must do, but something that I couldn't individually consider or determine just for the city. I'd have to look across the board. But I am supportive of approaching any way we can to identify the best way to do that and discharge our responsibilities.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda, very much for your work on this. Now, we're moving on to item number 14, the County-wide Strategic Safety Board verbal update, which, as chair, I attend, but unfortunately got caught in a serious road accident on the A14 and missed the meeting. I wasn't actually in the road accident, but my car was detained, so I wasn't able to attend the meeting. So I have some points from Alistair Baker, who facilitates the meeting on behalf of the Police and Crime Commissioner, which I may add to, but I'm going to ask Ray if he would be so kind as to summarise the key points for our meeting.
So there was actually a report came from Dorothy Gregson in relation to the development session that she ran. That was to do with bringing together key partners to look at how collectively the board can translate and improve strategic coordination into practical action and shared outcomes. There were some presentations at that on community resilience, think communities, early help, prevention and planned local problem solving training for partners. You've already heard about Val Thomas and you've discussed that, so I'm not going to give you that again. Some of the points that were brought out were that CSPs and their members have key roles to play in local promotion and coordination of actions and interventions and prevention work streams. And partners identified a number of existing or planned training inputs and resources that could be utilised to deliver that. This included building on the current training package, and there was an offer from Joe Proctor from the Safeguarding Executive Board for training on adults and children. So that's a joint workforce and open to all CSPs, people who believe could actually benefit from that. And that's a range of courses on offer: safeguarding generic honour-based violence, female genital mutilation, exploitation, mental health, domestic abuse, online safety, and there's other ones as well. The courses are held across the county and can be viewed and booked online, and that's through the board's website. And so I'll leave you with that. There's also community problem solving, and that was presented by Inspector Karen Pope. That's a multi-agency delivery of training from a problem-centric perspective, and it's key to achieving success in partnerships-oriented problem-solving. Therefore, it has been proposed that there will be workshops on offer and broken down into problem-solving areas, and that's going to take place between the 25th of February and the 15th of March. And CAMS Constabulary will fund 15 days worth of problem-solving training facilities, and that will be delivered by Sylvia Chenery. Yeah. She's got some really good stuff that she's been doing from community safety, criminology, repeat victimisation, etc. So she's very well done. The other things that were brought up, as you probably know, the Police and Crime Commissioner went out to community to look at their thoughts on the precept. There were 3 proposals. There's one preferred one, which was proposal 2 of £2 for a category D property. Of the over 2,000 people responded, 61% were in agreement to that. 23% actually wanted to go higher and have the £10 a month, which would be brilliant, but we can't do that at the moment. So in total you've got 84% people that are in favour of that. That will give an extra 50 officers, and those officers from the Chief Constable, who said he would be trying to put all those officers into community groups. So that's from that. I think that's about it at the moment.
Thank you very much. And of course, just reminding people that the public papers from that meeting are available. Website, and we've been asked that it's a bit more easy to find on the website.
I've got that down here as a question.
Thank you. I've find anybody to find them. I've looked for myself.
Yeah, I can give you another thing. I was down in London, which I told people earlier on, and they were looking at CSPs, and they're having a bit of a deep dive into it through all PCCs. And we were asked to do a presentation, because Cambridge has been seen as one that's got a lot of good practice and good work going on. So I think really pat yourselves on the back, because people are asking questions. And one thing that they asked is how come the number of expulsions from schools has reduced in Cambridge and Peterborough compared to other places. And I think that's through councils and schools and everybody working together. So I know you've got a part in that as well, so well done. And there will be things hopefully coming out from that, which I will feed back to you once it does come out.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, comments for Ray?
It was just an observation from the police and crime system, was that the number of responses from Cambridge City to the survey was actually quite low, which was a surprise, because we do like to survey community. So I do wonder what the overall figure would have looked like had we managed to have got a good number of responses from Cambridge City.
I don't know. All we can do is we can put out the information out there and see who responds. It would be wrong of us to go out and actually start asking people, can you do that survey? Can you do that survey? It's got to be voluntary. But it was out there, it was well publicised. Actually, in comparison to some of the other PCCs, we got a really good response. Very good response. But it's up to the public to actually respond. We can't force them to do it.
Chairman, just to carry on from the Deputy Commissioner's point there around the problem-solving training for the staff later in the month. So 15 days of the training. And I just wanted to give you reassurance that the funding for that has come from bids into money that's been confiscated through criminal assets. It's a really, really good, positive recycling of criminal assets into supporting communities and developing our skills. There's still some availability for any agency that's involved in partnerships or supporting any of the work that we do to become involved in that. So if anyone is not booked on or wishes to be booked on, please let us know and we can try to make that happen. The nature of the provision that we have is a series of inputs that range from the executive level right the way down to street level. There's some really good opportunities there. And whilst across the county we've got a lot of experience, they are bringing in people from internationally, a lot of people from some of the top performing constabularies and partnerships, places like Durham that are exceptionally good at some of this. So it should be a really, really good insight. So if anyone wants to participate in those or has staff that they're responsible for or wants to come and see that, then by all means, perhaps with your permission, Chair, through Louise, I'm happy to make that happen. And they're being delivered across the county in various locations.
I'd just like to add actually that they're actually training some people to go out and deliver it as well.
So, Linda, I'll come to you in 1 second. I'd just like to know how we find out about these courses. Where is the information?
Which course are you
Those ones, yeah. I think the contact who's coordinating the police is Inspector Carolyn Pope, who's based at police headquarters.
Okay.
So she had certainly said, I think, I'm not sure Antoinette was actually at the meeting, or was she?
No,
you weren't, of course, didn't you? Because Antoinette there was a cross with one of the other meetings as well. So Linda has got some information around that for the city.
And just to say, we have put forward someone to become a trainer, and we have put the invitation out to the organisation, representatives from the organisation on our problem-solving group. So we've got ones, obviously the trainer has to be trained first, and then we've got some dates in for passing on that training.
So I might have misread the date, but I thought the Cambridge City one was actually the 14th of this month.
It is, yes.
So it's very tight time of that. But the reason I know the next news, well, East Cams are doing it as us, well, all districts are, South Cams are doing it over community centre.
We have more than one date, so
Right. Okay.
I think there was quite a confusion about dates, but we have more than one date, and the trainer is being trained in March, so it will be.
I do think this information has been circulated, but it might be useful if we could recirculate it in the summary form with the minutes.
We do have, sorry, it's just a venue, and we have a specific amount of people that we can fit into venues, and we've got a full take on for our first one. I will circulate it was aimed first at practitioners, frontline practitioners, and then we were going to start rolling with that from there.
It's a really good initiative. It's good that the funding coming from the proceeds of organised crime, as you say, Steve, is being used. And in terms of that fund, are there other initiatives that we should think about potentially applying to that fund for? How does it work?
We've been successful in applying for some funds for a wide variety of things. So we talked about the Transforming Lives project. That's been funded in part across the county through this. What we need to start doing, I think, is recognising that what this fund will look like. We'll have a greater understanding of later in the year. We need to recognise that there is a great opportunity in terms of using that for a wide variety of different issues. Rightly, the Chief Constable's focus is around investing that into issues that are affecting communities most, and also making sure we're completely on top of our game to deliver for them. I don't know what that fund will look like in the coming months, but we'll find out in the future. So it isn't going to solve every problem, but it is another opportunity to look at funding some of the things that we've talked about potentially.
We are involved with Inspector Rogerson, and a lot of the partners were involved in making a bid for several different, and we just haven't heard back yet.
Yeah, that's being resolved at the moment, but I think, do you remember exactly how much it was, Linda? It was around about £100,000, I think. And obviously the more criminal assets we can confiscate, the way that it now operates is a proportion of that comes back from the centre to local communities, which is great. So the more successful we are in tackling organised crime, the greater confiscations, the greater we can reinvest back into communities. So it does work well. And as we've said before, our focus in the city on organised crime is strong. So let's hope that budget continues to be topped up.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ray. I'm going to move us on now to any other business. I've got one item myself. If I go around the table and ask if anyone has anything. Louise?
No.
Marie?
Not today.
No, thank you.
Yes, I just want to bring up the number of 101 and 999 calls that are being made. That's not necessarily for the emergency services. Things like people phoning up because they're concerned about homeless people, people phoning up about risk begging or antisocial behaviour, when actually they could be speaking to different parts of the city or county council, and whether we can get the data for what I wouldn't like to say hotspots, but the key figures, so we can see that there's actually a rise of people phoning about homelessness during this time, that we know that we need to go out to the public to advise them of what they should be doing when they see someone who's homeless or learn about antisocial behaviour that isn't necessarily criminal behaviour, so that we could be doing more to help the emergency services with these calls.
Thank you. That's very, very important. Stephen, have you got
I was in a meeting actually yesterday, usually the commission, that he was talking around the latest data around percentages of calls and what they fall into, and there are some quite surprising statistics there. It's one of the areas where we do have quite strong data sets, so the raw material is there, so there's an opportunity for us to delve down and look at that. There is quite a lot of activity that's already taken place, but anything that we can do to identify as you say, hotspots or themes that we can talk more to communities about doing for them would be helpful.
So,
what the city or the county could be doing,
absolutely.
Districts, etc.
Yeah. Yes, I think that would be really, really good. And it sits very nicely with some of the other things that we're doing around alternative ways of contacting the service or other agencies. So that would be good. I'm happy to take that away, Chair, just to look at how we can make that happen and then access some data to give us a promise. So what we do with that. Yeah.
I was just picking up a point relating to that about the National Police Chiefs Council I read was considering whether 101s may be switched off overnight. I just wanted to get reassurance from you that that's not something that we're proposing here.
It's not something that I've observed across to the OPCT. It's not something that certainly I've heard discussed in any way, shape or form. For us, as I say, our focus at the moment is around expanding the option to do other things other than call. So our online portal now is better than it has ever been. Not always perfect, but no, that's certainly not a discussion that I've heard tabled locally. I don't know whether that's...
No, it's nothing that I've heard.
That's good to hear. Okay, so in terms of any other business, we've got round to Ray and then Mark, Rachel from the MJ. Have you had an item for us?
Yeah, well, firstly just say thank you so much for having me here today. Really fantastic to hear so much ground being covered and to see all the partners in the room. I was just going to mention, because obviously the serious violence strategy sort of came up, the government serious violence strategy came up, and also discussions around the role of CSBs. So the LGA is a member of the Serious Violence Task Force, which met yesterday, and the majority of the discussion focused on knife crime prevention orders and then being introduced into the Offensive Weapons Bill. But part of it as well was the Home Secretary has spoken about, it was already previously announced last October, but this new legal duty that's going to be placed possibly on local authorities, housing and wider social services, essentially to tackle and prevent serious violent crime. And there's going to be a consultation that's going to be coming out probably by the end of the month, I would imagine. Imminently is usually the word that's used in meetings. But there's going to be sort of a variety of different options. I think that will be partly where the CSP structure will come into it, but also sort of whether this will be a duty, whether it will be approach, whether it will be a duty on all partners, one partner, etc., or will just be statutory guidance. But I just thought I'd mention that the LJ will most likely submit a response, and I'd be really happy to kind of hear your guys' views further along the line. Also, something that came up around exclusions, and you were sort of mentioning that kind of Cambridge really leading the way on this issue. You will all know that Edward Timpson, the Minister for DfE, is leading an exclusions review at the moment, and at the next Serious Violence Task Force meeting, he's expected to announce his findings of the exclusions review, and that will have some links in with serious violent crime and sort of the links there around off-rolling schools and exclusions, so that might be worth mentioning. And then just with regards to the domestic abuse that was covered earlier and the plans around that, really fantastic to see that the Home Affairs Committee report was sort of captured within that and the wider kind of domestic abuse consultation. So it's just to mention that we gave evidence to the Home Affairs Committee as part of the domestic abuse side of things. And the draft domestic abuse bill is obviously out at the moment. It's going to be going through its pre-legislative scrutiny, but we'll be working quite closely with hopefully the Home Office and the ability. So if there's anything that would be useful to be fed in from either this forum or just from a council perspective, we'd be happy to do that. And just also to mention with regards to the domestic homicide reviews that you were speaking about earlier, one of the proposals within, and you probably will know this, the draft domestic abuse bill is to have a national repository for all the learning and key best practice around DHRs. So that might be something that's of interest. The issue of, with regards to the costs that have come up today is something that is regularly mentioned to me. So that's something that will certainly be feeding into our consultation responses sort of during the pre-legislative scrutiny. So I just wanted to mention that part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. We very much appreciate that update, and you're welcome to come on again at any time.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Do we have any questions for Rachel while she's here? In the LGA? Thank you. So my AOB is been a bit the elephant in the room, which is the other event that's happening on 29th of March, Brexit. And as agencies, public sector agencies, we will all have been involved in planning, thinking about the implications of Brexit in whatever form it might take. And I just thought it would be helpful, as the County Council has shared its high-level plan, whether or not, in particular reference to community safety, if partners felt it would be useful just to share any thinking between one another to make sure that we have got a very connected approach. So we've already, as City Council, been in touch with the police and others, but just wanted to make sure that we are sharing information on this topic as it's relevant on issues of community safety. So I'd like for everyone to consider what they might use to share.
Did you want to throw issues now?
Not now. Well,
or would you
I
rather
don't
do it?
think
Would
we're
you like
going to
me
sort
to
Brexit in the next 5 years.
Certainly from the Fire and Rescue Services perspective, we're a statutory partner of the local resilience forum, so we will have people who are feeding into that. So we'll have a group looking at issues that may well come out of Brexit. That we're not aware of too many that are specifically going to affect the fire and rescue service per se, but there may well be some issues, that affect different communities. So we will feed into those local resilience forums. I'm kind of guessing Steve may well be in a similar position. So those conversations have been going on for quite some time.
I think the distinction for me, and particularly with councillors here as well in terms of communities, the distinction for me at the moment is there is so much involved in this that the command structure and decision-making process can be very, very complicated. So I'll give you an example. If we normally have an event somewhere in the city, it will be managed a certain way. Someone like myself will look at it. I'll look at all different kinds of issues around community impact, around risk and all sorts. This one has to be dealt with slightly differently because there's so many different strategic risks and all kinds of bits and pieces. I personally have a role in the constabulary in terms of, the simplest way of putting it is around managing any criminality and the safety of public spaces within the county. So obviously there's a wide variety of different strategic risks, but I will be holding a meeting in the coming weeks where I'll be looking for representation from each local authority, specifically looking at keeping citizens safe in public spaces. Not that there's any great concern around that, but so we are set up not only to make sure that those things have been thought about and resourced, but very, very legitimate things such as people using it as an opportunity to come out and protest, that we've thought about the implications for that and making sure that that can be facilitated. That's very different from the very strategic risks around transport and those other bits and pieces. That's much more around community. So that will be a specific thing that perhaps some of you may already become involved in.
Thank you. It's very useful to hear. Is there anything else anyone wanted to comment on or observe about their organisation's planning for Brexit? Okay. Thank you. So, key messages arising from today. Well, I'm slightly overwhelmed with key messages actually. But there's a couple of things that I just wanted to reflect back to you. Earlier on in the meeting, Steve said that if we are replicating what we are doing today in the new meetings that we're thinking about, then we've got it wrong. And I think that's a really important point to take away from this meeting. Mark said something as well which struck me, and he was talking about the importance of prevention work and that recognising there's a need to use evidence and data, sometimes you need to take a leap of faith with what you know is going to make a difference. So those are just 2 points. I could have chosen a huge number today, but there were 2 that struck me. They're not by any means the most important ones, but they're just 2 to carry forward with us as we go and get on with our work in our organisations. The date of the next CSP meeting is on the 2nd of July at the Guildhall. I'd like to thank you all very much for your attendance today and for Louise for making all the arrangements.
Thank you.